I'm actually the Managing Director of Food Innovation Australia Ltd. We call ourselves FIAL to try and give us a bit of an exciting twist to perhaps, otherwise people could mistake us for FIAL. And we're a federal government initiative. It's quite an exciting time for us. We've been going about 8 months, and part of that journey has been with change of election. So you can imagine the challenges that I've had in terms of recruitment, doing things, not having a board, waiting for the government to make certain decisions, but it's been really exciting. And I'd like to share with you some of the exciting journey that we have embarked on, and hopefully you'll get a bit of better understanding what I mean by a whole of food and beverage approach to innovation. And I suppose the key thing is, what do I mean by whole? People say, is that a whole piece of fruit? Is it a piece of potato? Is it a carrot? Well, actually, it's about the whole value chain. And I'll share with you the appetite that the food industry does have for this approach in innovation. This is the industry that I'm actually playing in. This is a map that maps out the dynamic system, that's an adaptive system of the food industry. It's quite complex, as you could appreciate, and you're not going to have a test on this map, but I will highlight a few things, and just to show you that it's operating multidimensionally. There's lots of subsystems within this complex system, so if you are innovating, it's actually more challenging. There is multiple stakeholders with various interests, beliefs. They're interacting, there are self-interests, and I have the challenge of helping this industry to grow and take advantage of the opportunities, not only in Australia, but overseas, particularly in Asia. So the key stakeholders for us are playing in this field, which we call the industry, which is enterprise. So there are small and medium-sized businesses that take the output from agricultural producers, which transforms that and gives us products. There are different markets, not only nationally, but overseas as well. We have various government stakeholders and bureaucrats who create policies, but also provide various great programs such as Austrade, AusIndustry, Enterprise Connect, and CSIRO, who are also very heavily connected with some of these initiatives as well. We have research organisations, universities, CSIRO plays a big part in that, and as well as we have associations such as like Food South Australia, Australian Food Grocery Council, that really do represent the interests of each of those groups. And what has happened historically, that we tend to think of a supply chain, so it's quite a sort of a horizontal interplay, but one of the things that, as you can see, there's interactions going in each direction, different stakeholders are playing with the SMEs, the networks and so forth, and so historically what we've done is we may have only considered the growers. And I'll give you an example of that. In the Grains Research and Development Council, one of the key focuses is overseas markets, and making sure that we grow wheat that has the right properties for the markets overseas, so it's very much consumer driven. But they're also forgetting that one of the key markets is also the Australian market. And it's quite interesting that in terms of the focus and how they grow this wheat and what they breed in, it's very different. So the whole of the value chain approach to innovating in the industry is quite relevant. And so I suppose why would we want to use this approach in the industry? The myopic approach has really caused us a lot of grief, and I'm not going to talk about a lot of the challenges that we have in the industry, because this is exciting about innovation, but one of the challenges that we have is that Australia's overall market share in the overseas markets in Asia is decreasing in every segment pretty much that we play in. And that's quite frightening for a country that has this fantastic resource of agricultural, wealth of agriculture, masses of natural resources, and we are not growing our market share in the segments that we play in the food and beverage sector. And that's a really a great opportunity. So as a result of that, we're obviously not capitalising on the margins, and we're seeing that dynamics being played out in the marketplace at the moment. So I'll share with you an example of what happens when you don't use this approach of the whole of the value chain approach to innovation. And in my previous role, and I haven't got the company name up here, but I'll share that with you, I was the General Manager of Business Development in taking their innovations to market. And my challenge was to innovate and help drive the commercialisation of products. And I know Alan and I worked on this project, and it was a novel wheat. It's called waxy wheat. George Weston Foods supports a lot of research and CRCs, and they actually bought out the rights of a particular type of wheat called waxy wheat, and that's a field of the waxy wheat there. But what's really interesting about this wheat is I'm a chemist by training, so I've got to entertain myself by having a few chemical structures out here. And normal wheat has a lot of what we call the straight chain amylose starch, and a small percentage of this amylopectin, which is the branch starch. And it's actually quite interesting that this waxy wheat has none of this particular starch, but it has 100% of this starch here. And what that does is it gives the wheat some unique properties which you can then utilise in various baking and other products. For example, it has really great freeze-thaw properties. In other words, you can freeze the wheat and you don't lose, or freeze the product that's made from it, and it doesn't lose its integrity. It has it can also replace fat, so it has quite a waxy taste. So you can replace fat within your product and use that in a croissant, but yet you don't have any fat, you've just got flour in there. And you still have that sort of stretchability and sort of the puffiness of a croissant. And most importantly, you can replace enzymes in a bread system. So what that means is you could produce a preservative-free bread that has about 6 days shelf life, 7 days shelf life. Isn't that exciting? And that's exactly what consumers want. So this was a product that we identified had a really great opportunity for our consumers and markets, so it was very much insight-driven. We did a lot of testing and positioning of the statements that we'd use to produce a bread. We did some great MPD. We had MPD stage gate processes, the whole lot. And we ended up doing some test bakery trials on products, tested it with consumers, and we thought, right, we've got a winner here. So let's start scaling up the wheat. I'm not sure if you're aware of the cycle of producing a novel wheat. You can't just grow up, 100,000 tonnes overnight. It takes you a few years to get to 100,000 tonnes. So we started growing up the wheat because we obviously a large producer of, tip top up and products like that in the marketplace. We obviously needed a large volume. And we then went off and did some trials up in various locations around Australia because it's a national footprint of manufacturing facilities across the country. But one thing that we underestimated was one of the colleagues of ours had a close relationship with the enzyme supplier that was supplying the enzyme system, which allowed the bread to preserve itself and actually have the qualities that we currently have in our bread products on the shelf. And what they did was, there was lots of cost savings by introducing this waxy wheat, as well as other benefits, functional as well as processing benefits. But what we found was they re-engineered backwards, so the cost saving to the business disincentivised the actual opportunity from realising. So we actually forgot one of our key stakeholders in the whole value chain, which was an ingredient supplier to the whole thing, which in the end, this project was stopped and not commercialised after lots of money being poured into it to get it to market. So that's an example of how you can erode value if you do not use the whole of the value chain approach and all your stakeholders in the product that you're trying to deliver. So I've got the challenge. We talked about culture, and I touched on this in one of my questions. In terms of what we've identified that are challenges in the industry to innovate, is no different to what all of you have talked about. It's actually quite exciting because it means that my challenges are no different to yours. But one of the challenges that I have is actually the overarching systemic cultural issues that are in the industry, which is resulting in some of the behaviours and the dynamics that are shaping the industry. But what's really exciting is we do have some great examples on that journey. I know a lot of the examples here are talking about successes and how they have delivered a great innovations in their stories. But I'm embarking and saying to you that we've started and we have got some exciting projects underway and they're starting to show some value, and we're only in the beginnings of the journey. So it's actually quite exciting to see that the approach is working. So let me share with you some of the examples from the industry. So the first example that we've got, I don't know if you know what finger lime is, it's what they call the citrus. It's the caviar of the citrus fruit. And what you do is you put it on top of your prawns, on top of your fruit in a salad, and it sells for about $80 a kilo. Not a bad investment. And it's quite an exciting crop for the growers, it's grown in a northern part of New South Wales, southern part of Queensland. And it's really exciting. But the challenge of this crop is, and the chefs overseas, particularly in Asia, love it, and they can't get enough of it. But the problem is that you can only harvest it for 3 months of the year, because obviously, you know, it grows, there's a 12-month cycle, and then you can't freeze it, and because it loses its integrity and its functionality, and it loses its sort of colouring appeal for the marketplace. So the challenge is, how do they overcome it? And so there's a group of people who are looking at, they've developed some technology which is allowing them to process the insides of the citrus fruit. They're looking at, with scientists up in Queensland, they're looking at how they can freeze it without losing its integrity. They're working with the growers to scale up the production. They're working with a sales and marketing arm that's going to market and sell these products, and they already are selling, but they're wishing to expand the availability of this product in the marketplace all year round. And they're working with the end customers, particularly chefs and buyers of high-end retail sort of segment of what's the end market requiring. And the last part of the piece that's really critical is the logistics and getting the product there without degrading the quality of the finger lime. And it's a really great example of how they're all working, all the various components are fitting together, and they're looking at how they can address the challenge, which is the major new industry subsector for the actual finger lime. As a consumer, if I'm allergic to gluten and you put gluten into my food, then I potentially could have an adverse reaction. So this is a project that's been going for 7 years, and it's quite exciting because now they're looking at taking this to as an online tool for accessibility to various manufacturers, not only in Australia but around the world. And they're taking it one step further. So scientists are working with companies. They're also working with computer software makers who are looking at developing this online tool. And they're also looking at how they can develop this as a tool which is online and able to become the benchmark for a global benchmark in terms of calculating of allergens. And what's really exciting about it is that it's about pooling data from various sources, which never has been done before, and that's about globally how they can do that. And it's quite exciting, and it's a great example of collaboration across the industry, not only in Australia but also overseas. The Tasmanian Active Honey Group are quite an interesting group of people, because I don't know if you're aware, but leatherwood honey, it's grown in a World Heritage Site down in Tasmania, and it has a distinct taste profile, as well as a profile of its bioactives as well. And what they want to do is to help grow this market in terms of its heritage, and also the end customer over in Asia is particularly saying we actually wanted some more understanding of what's the differentiation of this honey, because they can taste it, they can feel it, but they actually would like a bit of credibility behind it. So what they're doing is they're working together to develop a group of growers are working together to develop a certification system. So all the honey growers in the area are able to pull their honey into a pot and effectively market this with this certification process, which allows the end customer to be guaranteed that this product meets the requirements of the end customers in Asia. And it's quite exciting because it's a nice little way of how we can value add to the industry and help realise some of the sort of unleashed potential that we have in this country. This is an exciting one for me because I love shopping, like most women do. Not that we're being sexist by the previous presenters' slides, but it's actually quite interesting. The world of channels is really changing in the food and beverage sector. What we're finding is that historically the sector has gone to the traditional channels of retail, supermarkets. They may have done a bit of export or dabbled in it, but not necessarily got it right. Then they've also looked at the food service segment, but played less so depending on what their contacts are and whether that was of interest. But there is a whole new opportunity out there because, as you can see, consumers are changing, buyers are changing, and T-Mart over in Asia in terms of how people are buying products is really taking off. And so e-commerce is here, and we're currently seeing the retail space and how it's changing and how people are buying more and more online, and our industry needs to be aligned with that. So we've got a project that we're working in collaboration with Victoria University where they're scoping out the current e-commerce platforms. They're looking at all the different providers. We're working with Austrade, who's in market overseas, to understand currently the different platforms. We're working with companies and logistics supply chain of how we're going to make this channel more accessible and help the industry access this news channel that they never have thought of before. We're not the only ones that are looking at this approach. There are many others, and I've just mentioned a couple up here on this slide, but there are many more who are looking at this holistic approach to the value chain and reasons for the success, because Australia needs to do that if they're going to take advantage of the opportunities overseas. So I suppose what's different about our approach to what, and it's been a great listening to all these presentations today, because you've all given me a good segue into a summary of what each of these projects are doing, but it's also our philosophy and our approach of what we do. And I'll randomly just go through them and just share with you and talk a bit about what they all mean. You know, being outcome focused is really critical. It's not about me, or it's about Alan, or it's about David or Jane or whoever it might be. It's about what we're trying to achieve. So it's about being focused on the goal of the industry or the opportunity. It's a real ability to understand what this goal is and really understand the essence of what you're trying to achieve. And that's something that I found that language is quite interesting and how people use that, but the ability to articulate what the goal is and the ability to understand what that challenge is cannot be done very easily by a lot of people. It's the ability to be open to ideas. We're on an interesting journey in the sense that I actually don't know how we're going to solve most of the problems that I have in terms of my remit and to address the issues that the government has given to us. But I'm open and I'm agile and constantly changing my thinking as I talk and engage with stakeholders. It's about having a common goal, and I liked the previous presenters who've all commented on it's got to be a common shared goal. It's a mutual goal where we're both going to benefit from it. Otherwise, there's no ownership. It's about seeing the big picture, so it's about being visionary, you know, having a picture of what the future could look like in terms of how the industry is going to play. It's about being connected and being connected to multiple stakeholders. All the projects that I talked about and their appetite for having this approach, they're all multilaterally being connected on all different types of dimensions, and that's quite exciting because it's different ideas that are coming to the solution. And that's also about the cross-industry approach. We're working very closely with all parts of the industry, and not only within our own industry, but in adjacent industries to try and take their learnings and apply it to what we're doing. It's about challenging the outcome. Just because you've got a solution, it doesn't mean it's the right. You've got to constantly challenge to make sure that you're right and you're revising. And I do like the idea of that incremental where you're constantly going backwards and optimising it to meet what the real need and driver is. It's about being driven. My brother-in-law is an entrepreneur, and basically he's so driven, but he has so many challenges every day. If you knew what you were going to embark on, you would never actually do it, but you're determined to get through all the challenges. So you've got to really be prepared to drive to the outcome. There is got to be trust. We're talking about bringing companies and organisations together that are going to share potentially IP. And unless you're prepared to trust each other, it will not be the beginning of the journey. And it really makes it hard to have conversations. I've had a workshop where I had stakeholders around the table and there was so much noise there, but part of the reason was they were sitting there, they were passive, they weren't prepared to share, and that's because they did not trust us around the table. And that, of course, comes with time for some, but some it comes more easily. Inspiration is really important. It's the ability to inspire others, and I think we're all here today as a result of Alan and Hargraves and the great work that they do. They're great inspiration to all of us, but unless you can do that, inspire others through a Catalyst program, it's going to be very difficult to do what you need to do in your job. You've got to believe in it too, and I think that's what gets you through the real pits in your journey. And if you don't believe in it, then it's time to give in. And I quite like, you know, what Murray said. I think it was Murray who said, "Oh, I believe in. I'll put my money where my mouth is, because I would invest in it too." And that's a great indication of your commitment and belief in it. The thing that everyone has in common is that they share. They're all prepared to share something, And that's a really great gift of what we're trying to achieve in this whole approach of the food and beverage industry. And on that note, I would like to thank you for sharing your time with me. That's all I have. We have a team of 5 people, so you can imagine, and there's 13,000 businesses in my sector that I will potentially liaise with. There's over 200,000 people, so the only way we can operate is through networks. So how we engage is through catalysing the networks to actually execute and work with them and through them to actually deliver the programs and initiatives that we want to reach out to. And one of the things I'd just like to add to that point too about how do we engage with them, our strategy, which we're just launching now, we haven't told the industry what we are doing. We've actually asked for their feedback. So as a result of their consultation with the industry, we have shaped our strategy, and we're going back now to do a second round. In 1 year, we're hoping to reach about 1,500 stakeholders, which is businesses, organisations within the map that I showed you. And a challenge for us is how do we reach them to incorporate their feedback and bring them along on the journey.